Okay, and then I have reproduction. And by reproduction, I mean first having students internalize the material that they learn, and later on articulating it to somebody in the class, so either myself or another student. So I might ask students to paraphrase what they've learned back to me in their own words. I might also ask students to do this role switching activity where one student in each pair plays the instructor and the other one the student. And the teacher has to essentially teach the student what I just taught the class. Okay, and then the fun part, engagement tools. Now, based on Learner Encounters research, we tend to remember things best when there's some kind of positive feeling associated with it. So in moments of excitement, for example. I'm going to show you some examples of the tools that I use. Starting off with this one here. This is an online flash game which I like to use to teach punctuation. This is called Semicolon Wars. And essentially what's going on here is you're this army commander, you're leading your army and trying to storm enemy gates, trying to barge into enemy territory. And you want to break down the gate by putting correct punctuation marks in the right spots, okay, in these sentences that are given to you. So there's 4 levels. You got colon, semicolon, comma, and what's the other one? Period. So there's 4 levels, and students are really engrossed when I do this with them. They don't want to leave their seat until they beat all the 4 levels, which is actually quite difficult because there's quite a lot of design flaws, and despite that, they just sit through the whole thing, and I can't get them to leave. So. Okay, and I have a few more tech tools here. I have Kahoot, Pollev, Padlet, and YouTube. How many of you use or have heard of Kahoot? Okay, a lot of you, okay. So if you're not familiar with this, it's basically a platform that lets you design your own multiple choice questions. And students can answer these questions by making their selection from their devices, okay, whatever computer they're on. And so it's got a lot of colors, it's got cartoonish music to go along with it. And typically at the end of the game, I give a little prize to the winner. I know, Julia, you give the water bottle, right? But I usually go with chocolate because a little extrinsic motivation is always good, right? And Pollev is kind of similar. It lets you collect student responses on the spot. So let's say you want to check their comprehension of a concept that you've just presented. You can get their responses, or you can ask them a question and get their answers for that, okay? And Padlet. Now this is a bulletin board style resource sharing platform. So students can submit their assignments by pinning text, pictures, or videos to the board so that everybody in the class can access these. So it's kind of like a poster presentation session almost. And the funny thing is, people rather do this on a virtual bulletin board than a real one. It's just something about staring at a screen that's very exciting to people. I know I can't change that, so I'm just going along with it. And finally, YouTube, right? Very ubiquitous, so everybody knows YouTube. Now, the thing about YouTube is there's a lot of good resources and some not so great ones there. So what I do is I typically cherry pick the ones that I want, that are relevant to what I'm doing, that are thoroughly researched and well put together, well presented, right? So it's just that novelty factor, of having somebody else once in a while presenting information to the class rather than myself all the time. And that's the sad reality of it, because students rather look at a screen sometimes than their instructor. I'm sure that happens to a lot of you as well. Okay, and finally I have some non-tech games that I like to use. Now this is what you're looking at here is my go-to board game that I always like to use for different purposes, so it's really flexible. Essentially, what students do is they roll the dice and they move their token pieces around the board. And say they land on the A spot, they have to pick a card from the A deck. And on the card, there might be a question about sentence structure. There might be a question about punctuation marks and whatnot. So this is essentially like a blend between Monopoly and Snake's Ladders. This is a very engaging game for students, good for test reviews and whatnot. I also use maps sometimes, especially when I'm teaching lower level English. Say I want students to work on prepositions, right? So they have to describe the specific location of a country relative to other countries using prepositions like beside or on top of, to the left of, or in between, that kind of thing. And I have a bunch of review activities. Okay, one of my favorite ones is something where I ask students to stand up at the beginning. I throw them this fluffy rubber ball, and I get them to answer different questions. Once they answer correctly, they can sit down. So sometimes I get students almost kind of begging me for the ball when they know the answer. They're like, oh, hey, call my name. They want to just sit down, right? And they get a little prize sometimes too. So that's something I like to use. And do I have any extra time? So yeah, that's all I have for you. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about any of these things, I'd be very happy to give you more information. But I don't think we have any extra time. Okay. All right, thank you so much for your time.